Have you ever wondered if magic truly exists in this world? Magic isn't just the sparkling lights emitting from a wand, nor is it the spells that conjure gold and silver. Do you believe that the greatest magic of all is the invisible power that can pull a person from the darkest swamp of despair up to the launch pad of greatness? Can you imagine that a fleeting idea on a delayed train could completely change the face of global pop culture? Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a young woman in her 30s, unemployed, a single mother, barely surviving on a meager welfare allowance. Sometimes she had to skip meals just so her little daughter could have enough milk, and she was struggling every day with depression so severe that she even contemplated suicide. From that fractured, tragic circumstance, seemingly at rock bottom, she penned one of the greatest literary phenomena of all time, building a billion-dollar empire with nothing but a pen and scrap paper in empty coffee shops. That is not a fictional fairy tale. It is the real life, full of blood, sweat, tears, pain, and the iron will of Joanne Kathleen Rowling, the mother of the magical world of Harry Potter. Our story begins in the summer of 1965 in Yate, Gloucestershire, England, where little Joanne was born. From her very early childhood, Joanne exhibited a soaring imagination and a fierce love for words. In a house always overflowing with books, the chubby little girl with thick glasses was constantly immersed in the world of stories. Joanne didn't just love reading, she yearned to create her own world. At just 6 years old, she wrote her debut piece titled Rabbit, about a rabbit with measles who was visited by giant friends. When she showed it to her mother and received praise, the little girl innocently thought, "Well, then get it published, Mom." The desire to share the stories in her head with the world had sprouted from that naive moment. However, Joanne's childhood was not as peaceful as the pages of a book. She grew up with a father who was frequently away from home and a mother who gradually fell severely ill. Multiple sclerosis slowly stripped the health of Anne, the mother Joanne loved most. Her mother's illness, coupled with the pressure of a rigid education system, turned Joanne into a withdrawn teenager who constantly turned to books as her sole escape from a suffocating reality. Every great journey has a starting point, and for Rowling, that starting point wasn't in a prestigious library or an expensive creative writing course. It happened in 1990 on a train from Manchester to London that was delayed by 4 hours. While staring blankly at the English countryside rolling by outside the window, an image suddenly popped into her mind. A skinny, black-haired, bespectacled boy. He didn't know he was a wizard until he received an acceptance letter from a school of magic. The genesis of that idea was so clear and sharp that it made her heart pound. Ironically, Joanne didn't have a working pen on her at the time, and her shy nature prevented her from asking to borrow one from anyone on the train. But that inconvenience turned into a gift. For 4 solid hours, sitting quietly in her seat, she let her imagination fly free, molding Harry, Hogwarts, and a world of monsters and magic. By the time she stepped off at King's Cross Station, the framework for one of the greatest novel series had been completely sketched out in the 25-year-old girl's head. However, life did not allow Joanne to sit down and write a masterpiece immediately. Just 6 months after that fateful train ride, tragedy struck. Anne, her beloved mother, passed away after years of battling illness at just 45 years old. Her mother's departure was a fatal blow to Joanne's soul. The pain was so immense, so overwhelming, that she never got the chance to tell her mother about the boy wizard she was incubating. Heartbroken, Joanne took the first manuscript pages of Harry Potter and fled England, taking a job as an English teacher in Porto, Portugal. There, she hoped the warm sunshine would heal her emotional wounds. She met and married a Portuguese television journalist named Jorge Arantes. But the sunshine of Portugal quickly turned into a dark nightmare. Their marriage was submerged in arguments and domestic violence. In November 1993, the tragedy reached its peak. After a horrific episode of abuse, Jorge kicked Joanne out of the house in the middle of the night. With all the strength of a mother, she returned with the police to rescue her months-old daughter Jessica and immediately bought a plane ticket out of Portugal, fleeing back to Edinburgh, Scotland. Back in Edinburgh, Joanne reached the absolute depths of despair. At 28, she saw herself as the biggest failure she knew. Jobless, a broken marriage, penniless, and shouldering the responsibility of raising an infant, she had to apply for welfare and lived in a freezing, mouse-infested apartment. The pressure of life and the haunting memories of her past pushed her into the abyss of clinical depression. It was a period she described as having an absence of being able to envision that you will ever be cheerful again. Yet it was from that very dark abyss that true magic sprouted. Instead of giving up, Joanne used her own pain as creative material. The coldness, despair, and joy-draining nature of her depression were breathed into one of the most terrifying creatures in the Harry Potter universe, the Dementors of Azkaban. The pain of losing her mother was also channeled into the Mirror of Arist, where Harry saw his parents smiling. Every day, Joanne would bundle baby Jessica into a stroller and walk the streets of Edinburgh until the child fell asleep. The moment her daughter closed her eyes, she would rush into the nearest coffee shops, like Nicholson's Cafe or the Elephant House, order the cheapest cup of coffee to have an excuse to stay, and begin writing frantically. Writing wasn't just a passion at this point. Writing was the only life preserver keeping her from drowning. It was the only place where she could control her world while the reality outside was shattering. In 1995, the manuscript for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was completed on an old manual typewriter. Joanne sent it to a literary agency brimming with hope, but the reality of the publishing world was incredibly brutal. Her manuscript was sent to 12 different publishers, and all 12 sent back ruthless rejection letters. They criticized the story for being too long for a children's book, the plot for being too complex, and deemed a book about a boarding school outdated. There were times when the disappointment swelled so much that Joanne wanted to throw the manuscript away, but her fierce belief in the boy Harry held her back. On the 13th try, a little magic appeared at Bloomsbury Publishing in London, England. The chairman of the publishing house, Nigel Newton, took the manuscript home and handed the first chapter to his 8-year-old daughter, Alice. She finished it and immediately demanded to read the next chapter, firmly asserting to her father that it is better than any other book. It was the review of an 8-year-old girl that saved Joanne's life. Bloomsbury agreed to publish Harry Potter with an incredibly modest advance of £1,500. At the same time, her editor sincerely advised her to find a stable office job because you can't make a living writing children's books. They even advised her to use the pen name J.K. Rowling instead of her real name, Joanne, fearing young boys wouldn't want to read a book written by a woman. In June 1997, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone officially hit the shelves with a modest print run of just 500 copies. But what happened next wasn't just history, it was a cultural hurricane. Word of mouth spread, children went crazy for the wizarding world, and adults were equally captivated. The book quickly swept through all the charts, winning prestigious awards. Shortly after, the U.S. publishing rights were bought for $105,000, an unimaginable figure for an unknown author at the time. Hearing the news over the phone, Joanne hugged her daughter Jessica and sobbed uncontrollably. The days of poverty and fear were truly over. Over the next decade, 6 more books were released in succession, breaking every publishing record in human history. Long lines of fans wearing robes and holding wands, camping out all night in front of bookstores awaiting the release date, became an iconic image of the 21st century. The film adaptations grossed billions of dollars, theme parks sprung up, and Harry Potter merchandise permeated every nook and cranny of the world. From a single mother living on welfare, J.K. Rowling skyrocketed to become the world's first female billionaire through writing books. Yet, what makes J.K. Rowling great isn't just her net worth or the number of books sold. She is one of the few people to ever have the title of billionaire stripped away by Forbes magazine, not because of business losses, but because she donated too much money to charities. Remembering her dark days at the bottom of society, Rowling founded the Lumos charity to help orphans worldwide escape dismal institutions, and provided massive financial support for research into multiple sclerosis, the disease that claimed her mother's life. J.K. Rowling once stood before Harvard University students at a commencement ceremony and said, "It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default." The life of the woman named Joanne is not the story of someone born with magic. It is an anthem to extreme human resilience. When life stripped her of everything, her beloved mother, a family home, money, self-worth, and even her mental health, she chose not to collapse. She gathered the shattered pieces of her pain, mixed them with her boundless love for her child and the power of her imagination to forge her very own philosopher's stone for her life. Magic, in the end, is not something that falls from the sky. Magic lies in hands that never stop writing, in a mind that refuses to surrender to the darkness, and in the courage to dare to start over from the mud. That is exactly the most powerful and authentic kind of magic that J.K. Rowling has bestowed upon this world.